All right. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas. See, it's December 29th. So hopefully we are recovering from Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, all that good stuff. Obviously, we are a couple days away from New Year's. So that is exciting. And everybody's it's just this weird time, right? Between Christmas and the end of the year. So anyways, I thought this would be actually a really great topic for us since we are heading into like literally one of the biggest drinking holidays of the year, probably next to St. Patrick's Day. So I thought it was a good topic for us to bring up because let's be real, most people are going to want to enjoy a drink possibly on New Year's. So let's talk about how do we do that? How do we still maintain the results that we're trying to get, a healthy lifestyle as well. So all right, I'm going to jump right into this. So like I said, we are on the precipice of a huge drinking holiday, but here's the thing. I think that most of us want to have the ability to enjoy a drink here and there, right? There's certainly a happy medium between like drinking yourself into a stupor and then never drinking at all, right? I don't think that we have to be in either one of those categories. There's somewhere in between. I think that's where a majority of us kind of fall, where like we want to be able to have a drink here and there. We just had Christmas Eve, right? We may have wanted to have, a glass of wine or a beer, right? And so like, how do we do that in a way that's not going to hurt, our progress, right? And that still is in line with what we're trying to do. Because I don't think that the answer is that we don't drink at all. Certainly, obviously, that's some people's prerogative. Absolutely. I've certainly gone through spells of, not drinking at all. And I think, that's a personal choice. But I'd say for the majority of us, we want to be able to incorporate that and just knowing how to do that. So let's talk about how we can do that in a healthy way and not ruin anything that we're doing here. So let's start with just a few things that we do need to consider before we jump into tactics with alcohol. So the first thing you have to just know, like, if you have like really extreme physique goals, like you want to get super lean, you want to get shredded, whatever the words are, you want, like when you want low body fat percentages, you have to be super conscious of then your alcohol. That is going to be a limiting factor. So like if you're trying to get down to let's say for a woman, like under 20% body fat, for a man, like under 10%, like certainly you need to then really consider whether alcohol should even be part of your journey. But I'm going to say the majority of us, it's not really where we're at. Not necessarily trying to get to these like super extreme lean levels. Okay. But I have to put that out there. If anybody is in that category, then you're going to have to, I would say, really consider the place that alcohol is going to play. And so for most of us who just want to be healthier, who want to be able to manage weight in a more moderate way, right, then we just need to create balance, right? And we need to strategize and just be smart about our drinking. Again, it doesn't mean that we have to completely swear off drinking. It's just, let's just be intentional. I don't think there's anything wrong with being strategic about it, just like anything, right? We want to find that sweet spot that works for us. Last, I would say is you have to at some point consider if it's worth it, right? And we'll talk a little bit at the end about what to consider in terms of like, is it really worth it? Because by the end, you may think maybe it's not, or maybe it is, right? And so I think I just want to bring some awareness and like, let's have a game plan and let's be conscious of our choices and what are the consequences of those choices, right? So okay, so unfortunately, I'm going to start with the bad news because it's important that we're honest about alcohol and the role that it plays in our nutrition and just in lifestyle in general, right? And once we can just establish, okay, these are, the negative consequences of it, then we can make a better decision and we can strategize a little better. So we have to just put these things out there. So number one, I mean, alcohol is a toxin. You have to just know that from the get-go. It is perceived as a poison. And so the body's going to respond as such. It's going to be prioritized once it's in the system, meaning the body is now going to shift all its energy to basically getting rid of the alcohol in your system, because again, it perceives it as a toxin. And of course, your body wants you to survive. And so it knows like, hey, this just needs to exit the system as soon as possible. So what that means in terms of your goals is that like digestion, one, is going to get put on hold in terms of like the other food that's possibly in the system, as well as your fuel source is going to turn and change to alcohol. Meaning if you have, let's say, carbs and fat and protein in the body, well, the body is now going to shift to using the alcohol as a fuel source rather than whatever food you have in your system, okay? So you can kind of see where that can be problematic, especially when we know that alcohol tends to be paired with not the most healthy eating. So this is not to say, again, we're putting all the bad news out front first, and then we'll talk strategy, but we should be aware, you know, if we're going to drink and we're going to eat like highly caloric food, just know that food is not going to get burned for energy. It's going to be the alcohol first and foremost, because the body's perceiving it as a toxin. And so this is where weight gain tends to be paired with alcohol drinking, because, well, that food is going to get put on the side while the body tends to getting rid of the alcohol from the system. And then it's going to come back to it later. But at that point, that food may have already been turned into fat in order to be stored, because it realizes, well, the body's busy burning off this alcohol right now. So I'm going to go ahead and store this energy for later. And we have to keep in mind, that's how the body sees food and anything we put in the body, right? It looks at it in terms of energy. If it needs to tend to something else like a toxin, it's going to put that into storage to deal with later. So we have to know that, right? And so when fat loss is a goal, then we need to be strategic about our alcohol consumption and how we go about that and what we eat with it and all the good stuff that goes along with that. Okay, so there's that in terms of understanding that alcohol is perceived as a toxin. It is going to become a priority then in terms of expelling it from the body. Of course, there are other consequences, which I'm going to get to at the end, but I just want to put that out there first before we get into like strategies for how we actually can incorporate some alcohol. So with that, let's talk then, okay, if we decide that, sure, there are times when alcohol is going to be worth it, right? We have New Year's coming up. I'm open to having a glass of wine or so to celebrate that, right? Or let's say like we just had Christmas, right? There are going to be times when it is worth it, celebrations, birthdays, all that good stuff. So what are we supposed to do, right? So I'm going to present you with two scenarios in terms of how you can do this. So there's one way where we can incorporate it for the person who wants drinking to be kind of part of their lifestyle, or I should say even knows that like in this coming week, there's going to be a couple events like we have this week, okay? The other strategy I want to give you is like there's just a day where you're like, okay, I'm going to go to happy hour with coworkers, or, you know, I have a birthday event. I know there's going to be drinking and you can plan just for that event. So those two scenarios. So let's talk about the person who wants to have, you know, a drink on a weekly basis, okay? We can still do that and still make progress. Again, we have to decide if it's worth it, but we're going to say we've already decided yes. So how do we actually go about making that work for us and not work against us? So the first thing we can do is just make sure that we factor it into our weekly calories. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, they're calories and they have to get accounted for. I heard this really great analogy where, you know, a mile is a mile, no matter whether it's a mile through the mountains, a mile on the pavement, a mile in sand, like the distance doesn't change, right? But what changes is how difficult that mile could be, right? The composition of that mile, right? Me running a mile, let's say on the pavement, which I would never do anymore. I hate running, but that would be so much easier than me, let's say running a mile in the sand, right? But it's still the same distance. So I want you to think of that with alcohol. It's still calories. They still need to be accounted for. However, the composition of the calories is obviously what's going to be different, and obviously going to be more conducive to fat loss or less conducive. More conducive to healthy living, less conducive, right? So you just have to think about it in those terms. So again, back to our strategy then is we can factor in what we are going to have into our weekly averages. So a couple weeks ago, we did a training on how to kind of get through the holidays. And one of the strategies I gave was actually to kind of cycle your calories. So just like already factor in when you know you're going to have like higher calorie days. So we can do the same thing with alcohol. So I want to give you an example. So let's just say, I'm going to use like really easy numbers to make the math easy for me and even for you as well to just kind of like wrap your brain around. So let's just say you need 2,000 calories, let's say, to maintain, or that's where you're at right now, where you're having, let's say, 2,000 calories a day. Okay, so 2,000 times 7, that's 14,000 a week. Now let's say I'm already looking and I want to decide that I want to have 4 beers a week. That's, I know that I'm going to want, 2 beers while I watch Monday Night Football, and 2 beers on Friday nights. I'm just making that up. But I want to account for 4 beers for the entire week. Okay, so the average beer is about 150 calories. So I'm going to do a little bit of math. Yes, this is my math brain coming through. 150 times 4 is 600. So I know that during my week, 600 calories need to get allotted to my total, right? So remember, 14,000 for the week. I'm going to subtract out that 600. I'm left with a little over 13,000 calories. So I'm going to take that 13,400, divide that by 7, and I'm left with 1,900 calories a day. Great. That's literally all I have to do now every day. My goal is just to hit 1,900 calories instead of 2,000. And that is going to incorporate my 4 beers for the week. I don't have to now track those calories with those beers. They're already incorporated into my averages. I just go ahead and resume my week the way it is with 100 less calories per day. And I know I get 4 beers a week. Great. That's actually a really, really easy way to do that. It gives you some guidelines, right? It allows you to still enjoy, right? And it's going to be accounted for. Again, remember that mile analogy. A mile is a mile. The calories are still there. They're accounted for. Again, no, we should know we are taking away, right? Obviously 600 calories in this case from what I could be having. So that's where you have to make that decision. Is it worth it? Okay, so that's for somebody who wants to drink on a regular basis. Obviously, you can see like the more you drink, the less it's going to leave you. So this is where you have to balance that out and find, that happy medium for you, right? But I think it's important that, we still have the ability to socialize. And if that's important or that's something you do with your family, right, that we have the ability to do that and be strategic and be smart about it. Okay, so now what about the person who doesn't necessarily drink on a regular basis, but wants to be able to do that at a function or a special event here and there? This is like where I fall, right? I don't really drink, but I will if the moment strikes or if it's, worth it in that moment, right? So we're kind of going to do the same thing, but we're going to be a little more tactical and we're going to build it into that day that we'll be drinking, right? So well, we have New Year's in just a few days. So let's just go ahead and use New Year's as our example. So let's just say New Year's is coming and I am going to say that I want to have 2 beers on that day. I'm going to keep it pretty easy here in terms of math again, right? So kind of the same idea. So 2 beers then is about 300 calories. Now here's what I'm going to do. Instead of taking the calories away, I'm actually going to convert those calories to either carbohydrates or fats. I'm not going to convert it to protein because protein never gets taken off the table, right? We always are going to prioritize protein and we don't want to replace protein with alcohol. Absolutely not. Okay. So how do I do that? How do I actually replace those carbohydrate or fat calories with the alcohol? So again, a little math. Every gram carbohydrate is 4 calories. And so if I wanted to turn all 300 calories of those 2 beers into carbohydrates, I would just say 300 divided by 4, which gives me 75. So I would literally take 75 grams of carbs off of my day. And then it would be accounted for in terms of calories. If I wanted to do that with fat, well, every gram of fat is 9 calories. So I would just do 300 divided by 9. That comes out to about 33. So I would reduce my fat intake by 33 grams. You could be super, let's say, strategic, and you could do half and half from carbs, half from fat. You would just do 150 divided by 4, 150 divided by 9, and then you would split the difference, right? And so that can be done on that specific day so that it gets accounted for. And so I don't overeat in that case. I'm not going to overeat carbohydrates or fat, right? Because it's already allotted to the beers that I'm going to have. So these are ways, again, to just account for the calories that are coming in so that we're not completely blowing what we're doing. And we can kind of be at least conscious, right? I think this is great in terms of just bringing awareness also to how much like alcohol is really taking away from what you can eat. So this is where you have to decide whether it really is worth the trade-off. And again, like there's no right or wrong. Sometimes, yes, it's absolutely worth the trade-off, having, a glass of wine, with my sister, one evening is absolutely worth it for all the bonding and the chatting, right? Of course, right? If it's just random, just because I'm bored or whatnot, like, yeah, that's a little less worth it. So I think just like being aware of like what we're eating and how much we're intaking is a huge piece in terms of just like opening your eyes to like, wow, this is actually what I'm bringing in. We can do the same with alcohol. Like, wow, like look at how much it's accounting for, part of my daily intake, right? Other things to kind of consider, because while we did talk about the bad news that, alcohol is a poison, and so it is going to be prioritized in terms of burning, it's going to slow down, any other fuel source, carbohydrate or fat, for being used. A couple other things we should just kind of consider. It does slow your metabolism for a time. It takes a good like 24 hours really to get it fully out of the system. So it's going to like slow things down. It does interrupt your sleep. I think we all kind of know that. Like it may help you fall asleep, but it's not going to create a situation where you have quality sleep, not by any means. And like if you have any kind of sleep tracker, like this is the Oura Ring, like I see it immediately. My sleep is terrible when I have even just 1 or 2 drinks, and that's just the alcohol in the system. It's disrupting a lot that's happening there. In terms of hunger, your hunger is going to be up the next day for sure. It's going to dehydrate you. Obviously, your sleep was impacted, so that also drives hunger up. Cravings will be up as well, just because you're going to be wanting energy because sleep was impacted. And so that kind of makes things more difficult when hunger and cravings are up. In terms of also just hormonally can definitely disrupt. I know for men, this can be huge in terms of testosterone is lowered during times of drinking. So something to consider as well. So again, not to be a downer, but we should be aware, right, of what are the real consequences so that when you make the decision, is this worth it or not? Like you're using all of like the data in order to make that. I think that's important, right? So if you decide, yes, I want to drink, great. You have a strategy in terms of like, is that something you want to do on the regular basis? Or if this is just something you want to do for special occasions. Now, let me end with a few suggestions if you decide to drink. Let's get even more tactical. I'm all about being realistic that like, yeah, if we're going to, then what are some of our better options? So I always, when I talk with clients, especially about alcohol choices, will encourage a distilled alcohol. So a clear alcohol, such as like gin or tequila, rum, vodka, whiskey. those are great in terms of lower calories, and doesn't have added any other added calories, basically like sugar, which just throws things even more into a chaotic spin there. So I always encourage people to move towards a distilled. Now, if you don't want to do shots necessarily, one of my favorite drinks is just taking like a shot or two of like tequila, mixing that with club soda, a squeeze of lime. You've added no extra calories with the club soda, nothing with the squeeze of lime. So you're just dealing with like the 100 or so calories that were in the shot of tequila itself, right? That's a great way to have a drink. Still pretty potent, a shot of tequila. You can sip that, right? And it can be extended. Even if you had, let's say, 2 of those, we're still just looking at like 200 calories. So that's a great way to keep calories down, but still enjoy. Beer or wine would be my next recommendation. Now, beer comes in 3 main categories. You have your light beers. So obviously those are going to be least calorically dense. A light beer is generally around 100 calories, but not everybody can tolerate the taste of a light beer. I certainly don't care for them. I'd rather just have like a distilled alcohol at that point, because they're about the same calories. A regular beer, we're looking at about 150 calories. So like your Pilsners, your kind of lighter beers, about 150 calories. And then all you that are into your IPAs, your crafts, your high alcohol content, you're looking at a good like 200 to 250 calories per can, or bottle. So I would kind of use that as a gauge in terms of like if beer is your drink of choice. I tend to stick with the regular right in the middle there, so it's not too detrimental in terms of calories. Wine's a great choice as well. Most restaurants or bars are going to, give you about a 5-ounce pour. So you're looking at like 130 calories per pour. So that can be a great option as well. The only thing I would just highly discourage in terms of drinking is your mixed drinks, especially like your frosty mixed drinks, daiquiris, pina coladas. Oh my goodness. Like really like run the other way. Like you're looking at per drink 500 to 900 calories for one. I just like don't know when that's ever going to be worth it, but hey, that's a personal choice. But just be super aware that those mixed drinks, the more sugary they are going to be high calories. So I would be very, very conscious that if you're going to have one of those, just keep it to one, because you're looking at like a whole meal's worth of calories in one. So stick to those distilled, mix those with a sparkling, a club soda, squeeze a lime, and you're good. I mean, you could have 2, you could even have 3, and still you're looking at like 300 calories, right? And not too much damage there. Obviously, there are consequences down the line, but if we've already made, the choice that this is something that's worth it, then great, you can be strategic about it. So that's what I have for you guys. I'm going to put together a little PDF to kind of put together some of this, have like a cheat sheet. And I'll put that in our group for you guys to kind of use, because we do have New Year's coming in a couple days. So I'd love to just give you that resource so you can kind of look that over and then be smart about it. So yes, there we go. Let's see. Do we have any questions? If you have any, you can throw those in here. But it was thought this would be a good one for right now. So I hope you guys have a very safe New Year's. Enjoy just time with your family, and if you're going to drink, be smart about it. Plan those drinks and just be strategic. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still make progress. You just got to work smarter. And stay away from those pina coladas. Oh my, when I looked up how many calories, I was like, oh my God, never. All right. Well, I don't think I see any questions here. replay will be here in the group, and I'll get that PDF in the group as well. Happy New Year's, guys. And we'll be back to our Monday trainings next week. Thanks for your flexibility and letting me move it to today. But we'll continue on Monday with another training. All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Bye.